You waited hours in the rain just to get a glimpse of your favorite movie star, but when they finally walked by, instead of a smile, you got a look of absolute disgust. Hollywood has spent millions convincing you that these legendary actors were your warm, lovable friends. But off camera, they viewed you as a complete nuisance. Welcome to Fade to Black. Today, we are exposing the darkest open secret of the Golden Age, the beloved icons who treated their fans like absolute dirt. Number 1. Lucille Ball. If you approached Lucille Ball on the street in 1955, expecting to meet the wide-eyed, scatterbrained housewife who tumbled over furniture on television, you were in for a freezing reality check. You wouldn't get a goofy smile or a familiar catchphrase. Most of the time, you wouldn't even get an autograph. You'd get a cold, dismissive stare that made it very clear you had just crossed a boundary. The disconnect between the character of Lucy Ricardo and the reality of Lucille Ball is one of early television's sharpest contrasts. On screen, she was the nation's chaotic best friend. Off-screen, she was a highly calculating studio mogul. As the head of Desilu Productions, she navigated a viciously male-dominated industry, and she carried that heavy corporate armor directly into her private life. She wasn't a comedian on standby. She was a strict executive who viewed her physical comedy as a disciplined 9-to-5 job. Fans constantly approached her in public, fully expecting her to perform. Her reaction was almost uniformly blunt. People who interacted with her outside the studio often described her as impatient, entirely stripped of charm, and visibly annoyed by the intrusion. She had zero interest in maintaining the illusion the network had built. From her perspective, her relationship with the audience was a strict business transaction. She did the work, you bought the sponsor's product, and the deal was closed. The public felt entitled to her warmth because she was in their living rooms every single week. But Lucille drew a hard line in the sand. You didn't own her just because you owned a television set. If you wanted Lucy, you had to turn the dial. If you wanted Lucille, you were simply out of luck. Number 2, Marlon Brando. Slide a piece of paper toward Marlon Brando for an autograph in the 1970s, and he wouldn't just wave you away or pretend he didn't see you. He would look you dead in the eye and turn a simple request into a psychological interrogation. He was known to stop fans in their tracks and ask them, point blank, why on earth they wanted a signature from a complete stranger. Brando didn't just dislike public attention, he actively resented the entire concept of celebrity worship. To him, the public's obsession with movie stars was intellectually offensive. He viewed acting as a craft, but he also thought of it as a fundamentally ridiculous profession. The idea that someone would tremble in his presence or scream his name felt pathetic to him, and he had no problem letting the public know exactly how he felt. While other stars hired heavy security to keep crowds at a distance, Brando used psychological distance. He challenged the people who approached him, trying to make them feel foolish for caring so much about a man they only knew through a camera lens. It was a strange, confrontational dynamic. The glaring irony is that Brando built a life of extreme luxury, eventually buying a private island in French Polynesia, entirely funded by the ticket sales of the very people he looked down upon. He despised the Hollywood machine and the audiences who fueled it, yet he continuously cashed the massive checks it generated. For Brando, treating fans with disdain wasn't merely a matter of protecting his privacy. It was his way of asserting superiority over a culture he felt he was simply too smart to respect. Number 3, Frank Sinatra. In the 1940s, Frank Sinatra's early career was fueled entirely by the hysteria of teenagers. They rioted outside concert halls and tore at his clothes just to get near him. He needed that frenzy to build his empire. But as his influence expanded and his image hardened, his tolerance for that very same public adoration vanished completely. The older Sinatra didn't just ignore fans, he actively intimidated them. As he transitioned from a skinny pop singer to an untouchable Hollywood heavyweight with deep Vegas ties, approaching him became a genuine risk. He didn't travel alone. He moved with a tight, heavy-handed entourage. If you walked up to him in a restaurant or casino at the wrong moment, you wouldn't just be rejected. You might face explosive verbal hostility or get physically shoved aside by his security detail. What makes Sinatra's behavior notable is how this hostility actually strengthened his brand. He didn't bother hiding his nasty temper. Instead, the danger surrounding him off-screen made his on-screen roles as tough guys and mobsters feel entirely authentic. He no longer wanted the suffocating affection of screaming crowds. He wanted the quiet, fearful respect of a boss. Sinatra realized early on that being accessible made you vulnerable, while being unapproachable made you powerful. He drew a very aggressive physical line around himself, and he made sure the public learned exactly what would happen if they tried to cross it. Number 4. Wallace Beery. In 1931, Wallace Beery won an Oscar for playing a washed-up, fiercely loving father in The Champ. Millions of Americans, especially children, walked out of theaters completely convinced that beneath his gruff, heavy-set exterior, Beery possessed a heart of gold. But if any of those kids actually walked up to him on the street, they were in for a bitter disappointment. Beery wasn't just protective of his private time. By almost all accounts from those who worked with him and fans who approached him, he was genuinely unpleasant. The lovable curmudgeon he played on screen was a brilliant, highly profitable piece of fiction. Off-camera, he was famously short-tempered, devoid of warmth, and quick to snap at anyone who dared ask for a signature or a moment of his time. What makes Beery's case fascinating is how hard the studio system had to work to cover his tracks. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer effectively built a PR firewall around him, dedicated to scrubbing his real personality from the public record. They planted fabricated stories of his generosity in fan magazines and carefully staged photo ops with children to maintain the illusion. The studio executives knew exactly who he was, and they knew that if the public ever saw the real Wallace Beery, his box office numbers would crater overnight. He became one of the highest-paid actors in the world, specifically because audiences bought into a warmth that didn't exist. Beery's career is a perfect case study in the power of old Hollywood manufacturing. The fans weren't adoring a real man. They were adoring a carefully guarded corporate asset, while the man himself couldn't stand the sight of them. Number 5. Steve McQueen. Catching sight of Steve McQueen in the 1960s usually meant seeing the back of his head as he sped away on a motorcycle. That wasn't just a carefully curated Hollywood image, it was a highly practical evasion tactic. The undisputed King of Cool built a massive empire on his rebellious, laid-back magnetism. But off-screen, that effortless indifference hardened into a deeply ingrained, almost paranoid hostility toward the public. If a fan managed to corner him at a restaurant or a gas station, the interaction was almost guaranteed to be abrasive. McQueen rarely just politely declined an autograph. He actively drove people away with harsh language and dismissive gestures. To him, an approaching fan wasn't a supporter who bought a ticket to his latest movie. They were a trespasser stepping onto his property. This extreme defensiveness was likely rooted in a rough, unstable upbringing that left him with an obsessive need to control his environment. The hyper-vigilant, guarded edge that made him so captivating in thrillers like Bullet was the exact same trait that made him entirely unapproachable in civilian life. The public projected their fantasies of a rugged, easygoing American renegade onto him. Instead, they encountered a tightly coiled man who viewed public admiration not as a reward, but as a severe liability. He was perfectly willing to sell audiences the fantasy of the lone wolf. But once the cameras stopped rolling, he made sure that isolation was absolute, and he didn't care who he had to insult to maintain it. Number 6. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn didn't just avoid her fans. She actively marched in the opposite direction. If you spotted her striding down a New York sidewalk in her trademark tailored trousers and dared to approach her for an autograph, you wouldn't just be ignored. You were highly likely to receive a sharp, aristocratic scolding for having the audacity to interrupt her day. Unlike actors who lashed out from paranoia or insecurity, Hepburn operated on a hyper-rational, almost clinical philosophy regarding fame. She was arguably the first major Hollywood star to draw an absolute, impenetrable boundary between the screen and the street. In her mind, she was simply a professional hired to perform a job. The audience paid for the 2 hours she was on film, not for her personal time. Once you walked out of the theater, the transaction was over. She viewed the entire culture of celebrity worship as fundamentally undignified for both the star and the fan. Autograph seeking wasn't flattering to her. It was an annoyance. If a photographer pushed into her personal space, she didn't hide. She was known to aggressively swat the camera out of their hands. For decades, the press branded her as haughty, arrogant, and difficult. But Hepburn never apologized, nor did she ever soften her edges to win the public's affection back. She demanded to be respected as an artist rather than consumed as a piece of public property, and she was perfectly willing to alienate anyone who couldn't understand the difference. Number 7. Humphrey Bogart. If you walked up to Humphrey Bogart in a crowded bar hoping to meet the world-weary romantic from Casablanca, you were going to walk away feeling deeply embarrassed. He wouldn't politely excuse himself or offer a standard Hollywood smile. He was far more likely to blow cigarette smoke in your direction and deliver a dry, cutting remark that made you regret ever crossing the room. The cynical, hard-boiled edge that Bogart perfected on screen wasn't an act. It was his genuine disposition. But while audiences loved watching his sharp tongue demolish villains in The Maltese Falcon, they were offended when that same sarcasm was aimed directly at them. Bogart possessed zero patience for the sycophancy of fame. Like his contemporary Katharine Hepburn, he firmly believed that an actor's only obligation was to deliver a solid performance when the cameras rolled. He absolutely refused to play the role of the grateful movie star on his own time. To him, the Hollywood publicity machine was a ridiculous circus, and he despised having to participate in it. If a fan expressed intense adoration, Bogart didn't feel flattered. He usually just felt annoyed. He viewed the entire exchange as forced and unnatural, and Bogart hated nothing more than a phony. The ultimate paradox of his legacy is that the very trait that made him a cinematic icon, his stubborn refusal to cater to anyone's expectations, was the exact reason he was so bruising to meet in person. Audiences desperately wanted a hero. Bogart was just a working actor, entirely uninterested in their applause. Number 9. W.C. Fields. Most actors spend their entire careers terrified that a single rude interaction will destroy their reputation. W.C. Fields built a financial empire on being absolutely miserable to be around. If you had approached the legendary comedian in public and actually received a warm, gracious greeting, you probably would have assumed it was an imposter. On screen, Fields perfected the character of a cynical, hard-drinking misanthrope who despised children, dogs, and authority figures. What audiences didn't fully grasp was that he barely had to act. Off-camera, Fields was an intensely suspicious, isolated man who navigated the world with a razor-sharp, abrasive wit. If an admirer interrupted his day to ask for a signature, they were almost guaranteed to be hit with a barrage of stinging sarcasm or a flat-out, humiliating dismissal. But here lies the brilliant, twisted paradox of Fields' career. While other stars in the 1930s had to employ aggressive publicists to bury their bad behavior, Fields' genuine hostility was his greatest marketing tool. The public didn't want him to be polite. His sheer irritability was the core attraction. When he insulted a fan in real life, he wasn't breaking character. He was validating it. He effectively monetized his own misanthropy. Fields proved that Hollywood audiences possess a strange psychology. They will gladly support a man who openly despises them, as long as the insults are delivered with enough comedic timing to make it entertaining. Number 10. Richard Burton. If you approached Richard Burton during the height of his tabloid infamy in the 1960s, you weren't just rejected, you were verbally dismantled. With his booming, classically trained voice, Burton didn't need security guards to clear a path. He used his vocabulary as a weapon to make autograph seekers feel incredibly small. Burton's hostility was rooted in a deep, unapologetic intellectual snobbery. He was a revered stage actor from the British theatre, a man who built his foundation on Shakespearean tragedies. Yet, he found himself chased through European airports not because of his theatrical brilliance, but because of his scandalous, diamond-drenched romance with Elizabeth Taylor. He was completely disgusted by the vulgarity of pop culture. To Burton, the screaming crowds were mindless consumers of cheap gossip, not patrons of the arts. When fans approached him, he often reacted with biting condescension. He delivered icy, articulate rebuffs that made it crystal clear he viewed the general public as an entirely lower class of intellect. He couldn't hide his contempt for the masses, and he didn't even try. But the glaring hypocrisy of Burton's life was that his extravagant, liquor-soaked lifestyle required millions of dollars to maintain. That unimaginable wealth came directly from the box office receipts, funded by the very people he openly despised. He viewed the public as entirely beneath him, yet he spent decades comfortably financing his royal existence with their adoration. Number 11. Peter Sellers. If you approached Peter Sellers in the 1970s, expecting the glorious, bumbling physical comedy of Inspector Clouseau from The Pink Panther, you were stepping into an emotional minefield. Sellers was celebrated globally as a comedic chameleon, a man who could morph into 3 distinct, brilliant characters in Dr. Strangelove without breaking a sweat. But when the cameras stopped rolling, fans who tried to shake his hand usually encountered a deeply unsettled, chillingly detached man. Sellers didn't harbor the overt, aggressive contempt for the public that some of his peers did. Instead, his dismissiveness was born of a profound psychological emptiness. He famously confessed that he had absolutely no personality of his own. He believed he only existed when he was inhabiting a role. When a fan enthusiastically approached him on the street, they were essentially trying to strike up a conversation with a void. This total lack of a core identity made him notoriously erratic and nearly impossible to work with behind the scenes. That same volatility dictated his public interactions. Depending on the hour, a polite request for an autograph might be met with cold silence, a sudden dark mood swing, or an abrupt, wordless departure. He wasn't necessarily trying to be malicious. He simply lacked the emotional stability to play the role of Peter Sellers, the grateful movie star. He was the quintessential tortured genius, an actor who gave every ounce of his humanity to the characters he portrayed on film. Because of that absolute surrender to his craft, there was simply nothing left in the tank for the audience. Fans desperately wanted a moment with a comedy legend, but when they finally got close enough, they realized they were trying to connect with a ghost.